Welcome into the Big College Football Show. And guys, the playoff bracket is set. The Big Ten led the way, earning 4 berths into the field of 12, the most of any conference in the country. And we've got 2 weeks until all of the craziness gets underway. And with that, let's get you to today's walkthrough. Now that we know who'll be playing for the title, we're going to break down all of the paths to the championship. We'll also set the table for the rest of the Big Ten bowl games. Plenty of quality matchups out there. And you know we got to hit up the message boards on this Monday. Plenty of reaction to get to coming out of West Lafayette. And so with that, we'll bring you into our studio right here at the United Center. Jake Butt, the Michigan Wolverine All-American tight end. I'm Joshua Perry, linebacker from The Ohio State University, was a captain and a national champ there. Before we get to all of this, how you feeling today?
You know, I'm feeling real great. And we didn't talk about our underdog picks last week. Gotta win.
Yeah,
I gotta win.
It's amazing. I actually tried to talk them out of doing underdogs because there were so few games to pick. I really couldn't hone in on one. This is neither here nor there. We got to get to the Big Ten teams who will compete for the national championship. And we got to start with the newly crowned Big Ten champs. That's the Oregon Ducks, who got a first-round bye. Jake, what do you think about that?
Yeah, listen, they truly earned their seed. There's no debate. This is the best team in college football. I think they have one of the best quarterbacks in college football in Dylan Gabriel as well. But they have the making of a championship team, Joshua. What I mean is they've risen to the moment. I look at when they took on Ohio State. That game came down to the wire. Oregon rose to meet the moment. Penn State, they got Penn State's best shot last weekend. Oregon rose to meet the moment, a true championship football team. All right, Oregon will get the winner between Tennessee and Ohio State, who fell into the 8th seed after losing to Michigan. JP, what do you think about your Buckeyes?
Well, they've been talking about a new life. They've been talking about this NFL world that we're living in college football. So here's their opportunity. Got to beat number 9, would have to beat number 1, potentially number 5, maybe number 2. I mean, if they're going to be crowned champs this year, it's going to be what Ryan Day said. They will leave no doubt on their path to the championship. But we got to talk about Penn State here. They lost the Big Ten title game, so they're going to get the runner-up of the ACC, SMU.
Can't wait for SMU to experience a playoff atmosphere in Happy Valley. Good luck. That's going to be fun. But I also look at Penn State, and they say there's no moral victories in football. That's true, but they did show me something last weekend. That was the best version of Penn State we'd seen all season. I thought Drew Aller played a great game, and their offensive line played a great game. They're making me a believer. Maybe not to win a national title, but they are making me a believer. All right, and lastly, we've got an interstate battle brewing as Indiana will travel to South Bend to take on the Irish. JP, what do you make of this matchup?
Well, I'm excited for the Hoosiers here, first and foremost. This is a team that nobody expected to make it to the college football playoff, and here they are at the end of the year. They get an in-state team, which is going to be interesting. I can't wait for the storylines here. People mention the cold weather. Thing that stands out to me, Indiana played their last regular season game against Purdue. It was snowing out there. It was cold. And they played their style of football. I think their weapons are going to have to show up in this game. Certainly a challenge, but they're not out of anything. I like the way Indiana played toward the end of the year.
They certainly did play strong. They've looked strong all year, and I'm excited to see this weather in the different stadiums as they get to host playoff games. The atmospheres are going to be awesome. All right, that was fun, but let's get to the playoff bracket. So, Joshua, we just saw it up there. Maybe not too many surprises. Of course, the Alabama-SMU conversation was the big debate. Let me ask you this. Do you have any problems with the selection committee's decisions?
No, I actually thought the committee did the right thing. They did what they told us they were going to do. They said they weren't going to punish teams who played the extra game and lost, and that's why SMU got into this one. You can have the conversation about whether you think Alabama's better than SMU. We probably thought they were better than Vanderbilt. We probably thought they were better than Oklahoma.
Yes.
And they lost those 2 games. So I'm really not trying to hear any of that about Alabama. My issue is not with the committee this year. The issue is with this playoff structure. As we talk about paths to getting to the championship game, the team that lost the Big Ten title has a better path than the team that won it, in my humble opinion. You start to look at the idea of not being rewarded necessarily for being a better team. You get rewarded for winning a conference championship in a world where college football is imbalanced. I think that they're going to have to take a look at the structure of this. But for the committee, they did exactly what they told us they were going to do, and I commend them for that.
All right, to start with the SMU-Bama conversation, based on the current structure, the committee has a responsibility because it wouldn't just be the decision that they made right now. It was how it would affect things going forward. And we're already at a point where we heard Lane Kiffin and other coaches talk about how conference title games may have lost their importance. You kind of even alluded to that with how Penn State, as the loser of the Big Ten champ game, now gets a more favorable spot. If the committee had went with Alabama, we're done with conference championship games, right? If the committee had chosen Alabama over SMU, you would that would be the nail in the coffin to say conference championship games are over with.
Yeah, I want to say this, too. For Alabama and all the complaining they did afterward, our strength of schedule, we're not going to schedule any Power 4 non-con games anymore. It wasn't the reason. You lost 3 conference games, 2 of them to 6-6 teams. That's why you were out of it. But they did have a winning argument that they didn't go to. The committee ranked Alabama 11. They were one of the best 12 teams in the country, and they didn't get in because we have to let whoever wins the conference championship get into the field. That's what I would have said if I was Alabama and their administration. You left out one of the teams that was part of the 12 best in the 12-team playoff era. Are we really trying to crown a champ, or are we trying to do what we think is best for the sport? And those two things don't always go together.
Just to clarify your issue, it's the week prior's rankings is what messed up with the committee. By putting Alabama in there the week prior is what really hurt the committee.
I don't think that hurt them at all. I think the idea that we have a structure that says you have to take champs from the top 5 conferences and automatically put them in is what hurt Alabama. So let's move on to this one, though. We talked about the paths. Do you think Penn State or Oregon has a better path to a title here?
I mean, obviously, I have to acknowledge the fact that, just on paper with the teams that Penn State is playing, and you compare those to the teams that Oregon is playing, there you have it right there. Who wouldn't deny that SMU is a bit more of a favorable matchup than the winner of Tennessee or Ohio State? And then to go on and play Boise State, like that's the group of 5 representative, right? But I will say this, Joshua, as I've thought about this more, nothing is guaranteed in college football this year. Is Boise State easy? I mean, they took Oregon all the way down to the wire. Is SMU really that easy? That's still a dangerous program. And I look at the bye week. The question is how much do you value a bye? And I think if you have a great scouting department, a bye week can be the exponential value grows. The bye week also, after such a long physical season, remember, Oregon played 8 straight weeks without getting a bye. They finally did there late in the season. The bye week can be huge for a team's health, which we know is important down the stretch of the season. So I will say Penn State's is more favorable, but I don't think it's as obvious as some people are making it out to be.
Yeah, I think the bye thing is interesting because there are some teams that handle those really well. There are other teams that after a long layoff, and we see it every year in bowl season, you get the layoff and one of the teams just no-shows, right? And so I think Oregon is mature enough and they've got a good enough coach that it won't be a problem, but it probably does linger a little bit for them. And I think the obvious answer is Penn State has the easier path. You get SMU, you mentioned Boise. They could potentially get a Georgia team, questionable with the quarterback situation. Notre Dame's a comparable roster. If they got Indiana, they'd be favored. They have a better roster than Indiana. But I keep going back to this Oregon thing. They got a good path because Oregon's a good football team. I like Oregon's path because I like Oregon a lot, right? Like, they haven't given me many reasons this year to doubt them. And so regardless of who's coming out there, I think that they would be like, bring it on. We want the challenge, and that's why I like Oregon's path.
Yeah, I just think the gap in this year's college football, like teams are, the gap has tightened. There's really no clear dominant team. And for Oregon, I completely agree with you. That staff has proven that they will take advantage of opportunities, a.k.a. the bye week, and getting a chance to scout and get their team healthy. All right, Joshua, let's take an early look at that battle we talked about earlier in the Hoosier State. Let me just ask you who you think has the edge between the Hoosiers and the Irish.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's Notre Dame here. I think this is a game that comes down to the trenches, and Notre Dame certainly has the advantage there. Indiana, we saw them against Ohio State. We saw them against Michigan. They gave up 9 sacks in those games. They gave up 9 sacks in all of their other games combined, right? Like, the difference between a team like Indiana and a program like Notre Dame is the ability to recruit the offensive line. Curt Cignetti just hasn't had an opportunity to really turn over that position. So I think that's where it's going to come down to. The interesting thing, though, Notre Dame, heavy run team, 10th best rushing offense in the country. Indiana is one of the best rush defenses in the country. So that's going to be a unique battle. I think Indiana wins at quarterback. I think they win at wide receiver, but they're going up against a secondary that is phenomenal for Notre Dame. So it's like, as I start to look at where edges are, the one big edge in this game that I think swings for Notre Dame is going to be the play of the offensive and defensive lines.
And that's really been the edge for most matchups we've discussed all year. It's kind of just the edge in football. And maybe another edge would be coaching.
Yeah.
And I look at Cignetti and I listened to him, he gave some interviews and they asked him about handling the playoffs. He didn't even blink. He said, oh yeah, we're going to be good. This is what we do. At JMU, he was 7-3 in 3 different playoff runs, led his team deep into the playoffs. He's a guy that age is another thing that I think could benefit him here. Marcus Freeman, when some of those early losses he had in his time at Notre Dame were concerning. But I can't deny the fact that it seems like he's taken serious steps, and certainly you can see that just in this season alone, the steps that Notre Dame has taken. I'm looking at the coaching battle here that could be a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, both of these coaches, I think, have different advantages. As you mentioned, Cignetti, FCS background, his age, like he's kind of seen it all. I think for Marcus Freeman, though, there is this idea of the way that he's been able to motivate and lead his team after losing to NIU. These are 2 teams that have the best point differentials in college football. Indiana 1, Notre Dame 2. They found ways to go out there and win games just putting teams away.
I wonder if the Indiana-Ohio State game, it's a little bit different than when it looked on paper, too. I mean, Cignetti brought up the fact that special teams made the final score look. I thought Indiana was more competitive than they get credit for against the Buckeyes. Certainly, they'll need to be competitive to beat the Irish. All right,